Our LDS Pioneer Heritage here in Indiana. Sorry, things are driving me crazy. Brothers and sisters, it's kind of fun to be here. And I'll preface this by saying, growing up in Indiana, I didn't know we had any pioneer heritage. I didn't know the church did, I didn't know I did. And I lived out in Utah, and I'm going to be a little off for a minute. I hear people get up in Utah and give their talks and say, my grandpappy, my great-grandpappy, he was in the Ankar company and all these stories. And I actually developed a little bit of resentment. I didn't want to hear about anybody else's pioneer heritage. I didn't have it. What was the big deal? Cousin Mary over there knows that I was greatly erred, and we have quite a bit of pioneer heritage. It is a profound privilege to stand before you today and reflect upon that legacy that is woven into the very fabric of our faith and our state, the heritage of the Latter-day Saint pioneers here in Indiana. As we're here to remember them and celebrate them a little bit and commemorate them, we can draw on their strength, their courage, devotion, and the vision of those who came before us. Their footsteps literally carved the paths that we now walk. Their sacrifices built the foundation on which we stand. And today, take this journey with me, if you will, as we talk about some of them, and not just retrace their steps, but rediscover the enduring lessons that their lives offer us in our own today. When we think of LDS pioneers, our minds often turn to those Utah ones, you know, the ones that crossed the rugged plains, that arduous trail leading to Salt Lake City, and all the stories that go with those snow-capped mountains out there. Yet the story of our pioneer heritage here in this state is actually very deeply rooted, right here in the heartland known as Indiana. In the early 19th century, as the message of the restored gospel spread like a wildfire across America, Indiana became the crossroads. You ever heard that before? Which literally means a place of gathering. Sometimes it also meant hardship. The first missionaries arrived here in 1830, preaching the gospel to the curious and sometimes to those who were skeptical. Families were baptized in rivers whose banks have long since shifted and changed. Some of you in the beginning of this branch, we baptized over here close to Jim Fowler's house out by Tri-High School. We use that river quite a bit. A couple of my uncles, after migrating here from England, were baptized in a river at the other side of Cambridge City. So anyway, missionaries first ones were here in the 1830s, and they instantly began baptizing families and had converts spread throughout the state. And they had these little congregations, dozens of them were out throughout the state. And they were people just like you and I. They were farmers and blacksmiths. They were school teacher. Very similar to us, right? The 1830s and 40s were turbulent times for the saints, and they were driven by persecution from their homes in Missouri and Illinois. And guess where they found refuge? Indiana. Many of them came back to Indiana, where Hoosiers, living up to their hospitality, shared their farm ground and their hospitality and the communities with them. Many provided a temporary haven, a place for them to stay. Many helped them regroup to supply them with, and in fact, some of the Hoosiers volunteered and helped them out to take things out west. So Indiana lived up to its reputation. Here's a couple bullet points of the church in Indiana. The history of the church in Indiana is marked by some milestones. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to give them all, but I want to give you a handful here. In 1831, the first missionaries arrived in Indiana, preaching in Madison, Unionville, and Vienna. In 1832, Joseph and Newell K. Whitney came into Greenville and stayed there for about a month. In 1919, the first branch officially, now I said that because we had little congregations all over the state for 100 years, but the first official branch was in 1919, and guess where it was? Someplace where one of our cousins is a bishop now up in Lafayette. Or was a bishop. Is a bishop, okay. In 1927, the first official meeting house was built in Indianapolis and dedicated by President Heber J. Grant. In 1959, the first stake in Indiana was organized in Indianapolis, And my Uncle George, some of you may know, he was a state patriarch before he passed about 25 years ago, was on that first High Council as it was organized here in the state of Indiana. At the time, in 1999, there were 33,000 Latter-day Saints in 10 stakes. As of 2012, there were 11 stakes and 41,000. I don't know the count of stakes today, but I understand the membership is about 45,000, and we're the 10th or 12th largest religion in the state at this point. So kind of fun, that's just some trivia. So weary families, mothers, fathers comforting their children, fathers repairing wagons, friends sharing stories by the camplight were all taking place here in Indiana. And despite the hardship, these early saints found moments of peace and opportunity to strengthen one another. What does it mean to be a pioneer? First thing that comes to my mind is I probably need a handcart or something, take a long walk. But really, what does it mean to be a pioneer? For many, what that literally means, and this is a question we can ask ourselves, it was the willingness to leave behind everything that was familiar to them. Their home, their land, many times family members, loved ones, all for the promise of religious freedom and going to Zion. For others, it meant facing adversity with unwavering faith. In Indiana's history, our own history holds many of those stories. One is the Heaton family, who settled at the time in the early 1800s in Terre Haute. They opened their doors to the traveling missionaries and shared what they had with the fellow saints who were then on the move to go further west. Another, Mary Ann, who was a convert in Indiana, withstood the ridicule from her neighbors and continued to teach her children the principles of the gospel in the face of this adversity. You probably have never heard their names. They're not in a stone somewhere about being a hero, but nonetheless, their acts of courage are written in the records of heaven. What would you be willing to give up for the gospel? There's a book I love. It's called The Price That We Paid. If you've never read it, I invite you to read it. You can borrow mine. And it talks about the saints and their handcarts and wagons and the price they paid, and the privations, the destitute situation they went through, the hardships going out to Zion in Utah. And in the book, as they interviewed some of these people, they all said it was well worth the price we paid. And what they're referring to is the price they paid, those hardships, death, different things that they went through, was well worth the price to come to know their God. And so that's one of my questions today. What are you willing to give up to find God, your testimony, or your salvation? I don't know, it's pretty hard. I couldn't even leave my phone at the table. Indiana's contribution to the Pioneer Trail. Indiana's influence did not end with those who remained behind. Many of the faithful departed, that's true. They went in the wagon trains and went westward through the forest and plains and mountains, and we know their story. The ones we don't always hear are about the ones that were left behind and the ones that stayed here in Indiana. Trust in the future they could not see. The Hoosiers faced their own privations of hunger, exhaustion, and loss, yet they remained steadfast in their hearts. Our state played a role in the broader movement of the states. Indiana provided food, supplies, and sometimes even volunteers to aid the immigrants. The spirit of generosity from the Hoosiers was neighborliness, there's a word for you, which is very characteristic of our state even today. The National Road, this is a big one, because I live along it. The National Road, which is US 40, was originally a log stump trail, and it was cut off 18 inches or less, the stumps, so that the wagons could pass above it. So some of these first people, well, that's the road they were going on, and that's probably similar to the condition the road was on when Joseph and Parley took their trail. In 1834, Joseph and Parley came down the Ohio and entered what we know as US 40, or the National Trail, in 1834 in Richmond, and traveled through here to Indy and on their way out to Missouri. The pioneer experience was not confined to a single era. It is living a legacy. It is having faith to sacrifice. It is the ability to develop unity in the saints and to continue to inspire others. In our own lives, we face trials. Some are seen, some are unseen. We too must sometimes leave behind the familiar and venture into the unknown. having faith to be baptized, having faith to go on a mission, having faith to accept a calling. All these play into that, stepping into the unknown, as we call it. Guided by revelation and faith. As Latter-day Saints in Indiana today, we don't just inherit the land, but we inherit the responsibility to carry forward the work of those who went before us. Whether we trace our roots back to those early pioneers or not doesn't matter, or whether we recently joined, we all have part of this heritage, this pioneer heritage, and the responsibility to carry forward the Lord's work. We have a charge to be the modern day pioneers, to stand as witnesses of God, to strengthen families, build communities, and serve those around us in need. Brothers and sisters, just like we look back at those pioneers and those handcarts and those who went before us, and we have some admiration for some of the hardships and things they went through, I believe if we live up to our potential right now, here today, in our day and time, future generations will look back and they will view you as pioneers for the things that you did and how you carried on the gospel message, how you helped to spread the word, how you helped to serve God's family here on earth, our service projects and the way we took care of people. That'll be viewed in future generations. And hopefully they'll look back and go, man, that Brother Campbell, that President Jefferson, those were pioneers in the things they did. So, in my family, I'm going to deviate a little bit. I have a Mary and Tom, Donna's not here, several of us, Gary, Jim. We have a common grandmother, and an Edith Dale. You probably have heard that name, some of the Dale family. But going back another generation or two before our dear great-grandmother joined the church was another grandmother who heard about the church in England. And the Mormon missionaries went out there in England and they were teaching the gospel, and a lot of people received it, some didn't. This particular grandmother, as the story goes, loved everything about the church but didn't join because of the polygamy issue at the time, and she would not accept that. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to say this to my dear cousin Mary. Don't fact check me. Because I'm not claiming to get all the dates and names and things right, because for me, it's the gist of the story, and I think I'll convey that. But I may get a name or date or something wrong, and you'll still get the gist of the story. This grandmother, however, was impressed by the missionaries that taught her, and one of her sons was named after the missionary. Now, so we have this grandmother. She has sons. One is Thomas Dale, who's a son of Thomas Dale, and one is, I want to say Warren. It's not Warren. It's a W. William. And if you go back and look at the names of the Dale family, you'll see things like Thomas Dale, who was a son of Thomas Dale, who was a son of Thomas Dale. And his brother was Gerald, William, James, Frederick. And the other guy's brother was James, William, Frederick. Very, very little, in generations, very little name change, except for one. And we're going to come back to him in a minute. So our common grandmother, the wife of Thomas Dale, he was conscripted into World War I. And he had 7 children at the time, 1 on the way, so 8 children. And he was killed at the beginning of World War I in Belgium. She knew when he left she'd never see him again, and she was right. He was killed in the war. She never saw him after he went. A few months or a little while after he was killed, this committee, this compassion committee, came to call on her and offer her some consolation for the death of her husband. One of the people serving in the consolation committee was a dear sister of the Relief Society, doing her calling and being an ambassador or minister. And my grandmother took a liking to her and was impressed and began to have conversations about the gospel. Fast forward the story, she joins the church with all of her children who were of a baptized age to be baptized. Typical Mormon story at that point. They sold everything they had, they worked, the kids all, my uncles, Mary's grandpa, my grandma, they worked, saved their pennies, everything they could, sold all their goods to get on a boat to come here to America. I'm going to skip all the immigration thing for another day. It's kind of lengthy and it doesn't serve my purpose today, but this does. in all of our lives, God knows. He knows what you need, Brother Swin. He knows what you need, Brother Davis, and you, and even you sitting back there, my dear friend Matthew. God knows. He knows you, and he's prepared a way. And he has a poetry that testifies that he knows these things. And here's the unravel of this story I've been telling you. Grandmother comes here with these 8 children, and in one manner or another, she ends up in Cambridge City. And at this point, they're broke, they're hungry, they've exhausted every means they have, and they were taken in by one person named Lottie Dale. And all my life, I was told about Lottie Dale. He died, I think, in the 30s. And Lottie Dale is the son of the other uncle who was taught the gospel in England and didn't join. And remember, I told you they were so impressed by the missionaries, they named one of their sons after one. Lottie Dale's real name is Lorenzo Snow Dale. Guess who the missionary was? Okay, and so if you know anything about Dale genealogy, you see all these common names, and all of a sudden you're reading James, Frederick, William, Lorenzo Snow, right? Okay. Lorenzo Snow and his parents felt an inkling in England that they needed to come to America. So this restlessness they felt brought them to New York, and they got to New York and were there for a time, and the restlessness didn't go away. They felt like they needed to go further west, so they went further west, I think to Rochester or something. And in a period of time, I don't remember if it was months or a couple years, they felt this restlessness to continue going west. So they moved again and they made it to Ohio, where, once again, what do you think? They felt the restlessness. And so they came to Cambridge City, Indiana. And they got to Cambridge City, Indiana during the booming years of Cambridge, and it gave them an opportunity to be business people and to prosper very well. So they opened the first grocery store in Cambridge City, and they opened the first bakery. The bakery has just recently been restored as a home in Dublin, and is for sale if you're interested. And so the Dales had established themselves here, another branch of the family who was not a member of the church, had established themselves here, had the means, had the food, had the finance, had the place to stay. If you do any history on Cambridge City, you'll find out that the west end of Cambridge City is the Dale addition, named after the Dales. There's Dale Avenue, and the original Dale homes are there. And if you go out that road, you run into the Brick Church Road, old brick church, where the first branch of the church in this area was established in that building. It's a home now, painted white, used to be a schoolhouse, but back in the 30s and 40s-ish, I have to confirm with Mary, I told you I don't get the dates. It served as the branch. So here's why this story comes together, of course. Here's this destitute mom who joins the church, has the faith to come here and do the pioneer thing, the Mormon migration, and she's literally rescued by another member of her family whose name is Lorenzo Snow. To me, that is the Lord's poetry. It says, I knew this was going to happen. I will be there to take care of you. I know the end from the beginning. Have courage, have faith. That is part of the pioneer heritage. That message right there. Step into the darkness. Do those things that you feel and you know. There's no stronger testimony, I'm sorry, than a Dale being named Lorenzo Snow Dale, that the Lord says, I have this and I prepared the way. So when she got here, she had a place to be and she was taken care of. Faith in every footstep. They endured because they believed in a greater purpose. Part of the strength of the saints is unity and service. They were united because they cared for one another, watched over the sick and the weary, and shared, even though they had scant resources, they shared with those around them. They had the courage to stand firm. I can't imagine my grandmother in 1920 era-ish coming here with 8 kids on a freighter boat from England and coming to an unknown country. Be pretty tough today, but in those days, think back to the condition of women. It wasn't the friendliest place for them at the time, I'm sad to say, particularly one that didn't have the means, right? courage to stand firm in the face of opposition. So we as members of the LDS Pioneer Heritage here in Indiana, let us not relegate to some distant memory of the pages in the history books. Let us live our heritage in a way that we tutor our children, serve our neighbors, and worship together. Let us seek out the stories of those who came before us and record and share them. Let us live our stories and our lives in a way that we'll want them shared, that our legacy of service and the things that we did will be shared and inspire the future generations. Now I want to go to the Willie and Martin Hancock Company for a minute and talk about Ephraim Hanks and why I brought him up. See, we're in the position, many of us here in this branch, we are in the same position that Ephraim Hanks has had his opportunity in. Ephraim Hanks, I believe, was prepared from before the world like we were. He was raised and given opportunities to learn the skills he needed and the opportunities. When Brigham Young learned that the saints were going to be stuck out on the plats up in the snow, he also knew they were in trouble. As he called the conference of the church and to ask the brethren who could go and rescue the people out in the plains, the people who were in peril for their lives, everyone had the opportunity to respond, but only a handful did. And of that handful, when he went through the list, he said, "Brother, when can you go?" And I need a week, I need 10 days, I got to find a wagon, I got to do this, do that, I can go in X days or X weeks or whatever. As he came around to Ephraim Hanks said, "I can go immediately." How's that, brother? Because I am prepared. I am prepared. Ephraim had voices that were calling him, saying, "You're needed." You know what Ephraim did? He listened. And he did what that voice asked him to do, so he was prepared for that opportunity. Brothers and sisters, we need to be prepared. We need to be prepared, and we need to be helping those around us with that same urgency that they need to be rescued, just like these saints need to rescue on the plains. Our neighbors and friends in this neighborhood, our family, they need us to go to the rescue. I want to go on a little bit more about Ephraim Hanks before I close. Many of you have heard of Ephraim and George Grant, David B. Kimball, and others who went out, and there were other rescuers as well. Ephraim Hanks stands out because of his preparedness. He was able to leave immediately. He was willing to risk everything, and that is something else on this assignment. Unlike some of the callings we get, I've never heard President Jefferson sit me down and go, "Brother Fowler, I have a calling for you. It's very dangerous. You might freeze to death. You might starve to death. You may never return to your family and things." I've never had a calling hit me like that, so I think most of ours are probably pretty easy. But Ephraim Hanks answered that call, and here's the next thing I want to bring up. The mass had the opportunity, but they didn't go, only the few and the one. You've probably heard about the buffalo that Ephraim Hanks shot and fed the Hancock Company with. But did you know there were no buffalo in that area? Not before, not since. They were not known to ever be there. When we hear ranging buffalo, that is not where the buffalo ranged. So the fact that there was a buffalo there in and of itself was a miracle that the Lord provided. And here's the point and why that's so important to me and you. There wasn't supposed to be a buffalo. There wasn't supposed to be a convert. There wasn't supposed to be a buffalo. There wasn't supposed to be someone in need. The Lord provides those. But the interesting thing is, even though the Lord provided the buffalo, He still had to shoot it, dress it, and cook it. So we still have to do the work. The Lord is providing those opportunities for our missionaries and for us to serve, but we still have to go do the work. Somewhere, God in this moment is preparing people for us to come and rescue, to present the gospel to. That is part of our pioneer heritage. Draw strength from these stories. We honor those who went before us with words at times, but the best way to honor them is to emulate them with our deeds in our daily lives. When we see someone weighed down with burdens, may we lift them. May we apply and be quick to do so, the relief to those around us. When the storms of life threaten to overwhelm those around us, let us be the ones who stand ready because we are prepared, guided by our Father, with a steady voice to be the rescuers. The legacy of those who went before us, the saints and the rescuers, is not confined by some dusty journal. It lives on in every act of kindness, every step of faith taken, every community built on love and trust, every good deed that we do. We owe these pioneers a debt of gratitude for paving the way for us. We owe those who built our country, those who helped establish our religion, a debt of gratitude. Our lives are better and our lives are easier because of the things that they did for us. What did I leave out, hon?
I think you got it.
Gonna touch on one more thing. Jimmy has no idea what I'm doing, neither do I. I'm just calling him up here because I love him, he's my cousin. I want to talk about two more pioneers, our dads. 50 years ago, 51 years ago. My dad was Wilbur, his dad's William, they're brothers. They're much like Joseph and Hiram. One always looked out after the other. One was always trying to take care of the other one. One was a little more mother bear than the other one. One was a little more quick draw, get in trouble, and the other one was big bear helping him out. Jimmy and I probably aren't that much different than our dads. They were pioneers too. The Sunday school was organized for the branch, the current branch in our home in New Lisbon, and that's where we had a church in the living room there. Later on, it was some other places we'll leave out of the speech tonight, but Uncle Bill was there with my dad right by his side. One was the branch president, one was a counselor. And when my dad volunteered Uncle Bill's money to be donated, Uncle Bill said what? Sure. He did it because he was prepared. He had already made up his mind in advance that he was going to follow the Lord. And so it was an easy choice for him. And that's why I called you up. Brothers and sisters.
One time when my dad was in the bishopric, though, we were behind on planting, and we stayed out in the field until 3 a.m. planting. Dad was too tired to go to church, and I get there, and my Uncle George said, "Where's your dad?" Because he was in the bishopric. And I said, "Well, he's in bed asleep because we were out planting all night." He said, "Oh." And he came to the house right after church, and he told my dad, he said, "I hope them crops come up." And my dad was sitting there, he was just, we were out there every day on our hands and knees digging around, seeing if it was sprouting. And luckily they came up, and he said, "I'll never do that on Sunday again."
Thanks, Jimmy. Brothers and sisters, our dads were pioneers enough to help get this ground for the building, to help get the funds for the building. They felt the time was now when they did it. This building was built in the 70s, right?
Late
80s.
Late 70s.
Yes, just before my mission. It was dedicated on the Sunday I came home from my mission. So, and now the time is ours to be pioneers, to go and lift the burden of someone around us, go help a neighbor, go share the gospel, so that years from now, some Thomas Dale, son of Thomas Dale Jr. or Paul Jr. is up here telling your story and the cool things that you did for your pioneer heritage here as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Indiana. That's part of our heritage. So what are you willing to give up to help the Lord's mission? In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.